As we approach what is somehow the 7th movie in the Jurassic series, I thought it'd be worth looking back at the mess of the last trilogy, or at least one of them, and so I have decided to go for the middle child, Fallen Kingdom. Sandwiched between a copy and paste of the original and the worst film in the franchise, this one somehow being sometimes the best sequel, and other times the worst. The film bizarrely feels like the two extremes of the franchise mushed into one. The opening is so fucking cool. I mean, this overall is one of the most visually stunning films of the entire series, but this horror tone that it goes with to open the film is brilliant. The submarine underwater with the Mosasaurus appearing behind with its jaw wide open. True creature feature stuff. Seeing the lights underwater go out as well instead of the actual attack makes such an eerie atmosphere and really creates this isolating feeling. Then the actual T-Rex attack back on land, only being able to see it through the flashes of lightning before chasing this unfortunate fella desperately trying to escape into the helicopter. I mean, it's an incredible way to open the film. I have a few nitpicks with it, like, I don't know why they thought everything here would be dead. It's not that long after the last movie. They also failed to realise that they've just let the Mosasaurus out into the open ocean, I think. Almost immediately after this, though, you realise the film is going to go in a few stranger directions than what you may think based off that first scene. The huge fault early on is that this film seems to take the stance that protecting these animals is the right thing to do, essentially making the themes and ideas of this film at odds with everything else that has happened in the franchise. As Ian Malcolm says, Hammond played God and interfered with the natural cause of things. That has been the stance since the first movie and the right message.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Tackling animal cruelty is of course a good message and has been a part of these films, but allowing humans to play God is not so much. So when the film starts and ends with Ian reiterating that ideology, the ideas that the franchise has kept since the original standing against the monstrosities of mankind's interference, it just becomes so confusing at what it wants us to feel. And if the film wanted to take a more argumentative stance and look at it through the lens of the characters, and how they have connections to some of these creatures, I would have been all for that, especially because on a character level, this film destroys the last one, but the film doesn't really take an argumentative perspective. So the film itself as a whole package seems confused and is trying to present both themes that are at odds with each other, that don't mix. I love Claire in this movie. I think Bryce Dallas Howard does a pretty great job, and in comparison to her nothing character in the first movie, I'm actually pretty invested this time around. I particularly like the mirrored shot of the door opening. Before, it was crystal clean and she was completely out of touch with basically the rest of the world, but now the lift door barely opens and she's in a scruffy office in a regular coat bringing in the coffees. Owen is also improved as a character here, whereas before we got one line showing his stance on the park and then his character was just Chris Pratt being cool for the rest of the movie. But here he actually has conflict, having raised Blue, a raptor that shouldn't exist by the natural laws but does exist, a creature with an incredible mind that he bonded with through raising it, forming loyalty and care, and I think they make good use of him being in that difficult position, in between two worlds of his own, and both of these actors give really good performances. Of course though, they go to the island. We'd have no movie if they didn't. Claire is invited to this new character's estate where they claim to want to save the dinosaurs, and I'll circle back to this new character in a little bit because I've got a lot to say. But Benjamin Lockwood, remember that name. This is where there is more of a shift because we start to see some of the slapstick comedy that this film tries to do. The franchise is no stranger to comedic moments, but there are some parts of this film that are just ridiculous. We see Owen dragging himself over a log to save himself from the lava. There's some scientific error there in that, you know, wood's pretty flammable, but the whole tone of the scene is just so weird. I've got to mention the antagonists because they are comically stupid. The motivation to sell dinosaurs is laughable at best. I mean, money has always been the driving force behind the mistakes in these films, but this is just another level. Auctioning off dinosaurs is ridiculous, and framing it as a rescue mission as if the rest of the world would never find out. And it's made even dumber by the fact that none of the antagonists stopped just to kill any of the protagonists. There's a literal line towards the end where someone says, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, these guys died on the island. And then they just walk away. Why, knowing full well that they were going to try to get out and try to stop this auction, why would they not just shoot them? Or even, you have dinosaurs, you could just like feed them or something. I don't know. The film is just full of baffling choices like that, on camera and behind the scenes. The island exploding is a great set piece, truthfully. It's tense, it has that sense of scale, there's some great dino fights in there, and everything being consumed by the erupting volcano is great. The one-shot sequence in the gyrosphere is one of the best in the franchise. There is a great sense of urgency made as the water floods in, threatening to drown them if Owen is unable to crack it open, and also he's got to try not to drown himself while it's also raining rocks and dinosaurs, all of these things happening at the same time. The fact that they actually had these two on a railing to do this for as real as possible really benefits the sequence. It's tense and fun and just looks stellar. That final shot as they're swimming back up to the surface is incredible, and it is an all-timer for the series. The film continues its contradictory themes in ways that appear conflicted due to the production of this trilogy. Having the other two films by a different director with a clearly different vision creates some similar issues to the latest Star Wars trilogy, in that it's just very apparent that there was no plan here from start to finish. The film really tries to derive emotion out of the loss of these creatures, and it is somewhat effective, seeing it through the eyes of Claire and Owen, but it's ultimately so conflicted within itself. And again, so I'm feeling kind of for these creatures being consumed and swallowed in smoke, but at the same time, all of the ones that are now on this boat are still going against the themes of letting nature take its course and stuff. Like every time the film now presents an idea, it is contradicted by its own other ideas. The sequence of getting the T-Rex blood to infuse with blue to save her is pretty good. They get to showcase the phenomenal practical effects work as well as the fun dynamic between Claire and Owen. They stabilize Blue, and it's an effective scene as they are traveling back to the mainland. We see more of how cartoonish the villains are when we find out their motivation is to auction off all the dinosaurs underground beneath this mansion. And this mansion belongs to that Benjamin Lockwood, Hammond's partner in crime, apparently, up until they separated before the first film. I get the temptation to look to the past to influence the story you're telling now, but I just don't think it works here. He doesn't have enough of a presence in the film for this to really feel relevant, and the simple fact that this is the 5th movie and we're going back to say John Hammond had a secret friend that he fell out with before we knew him is just not really interesting to me. And he's killed by the guy leading the auction in a scene that I just kind of laugh at because it becomes insanely sinister kind of out of nowhere. The sole reason this character is in the film really is to give reason for Maisie to be here. Now, Maisie is this young girl that he is looking after in this mansion, and she actually turns out to be a clone.
Garbage! Is that it? Is that your best?
And that's why Hammond and Lockwood split up, because Lockwood wanted to clone humans. He wanted to clone his own daughter after she died. That's who Maisie is. She has lived her life believing to be his granddaughter when the reality is she's just a cloned version of his own daughter. Absolutely insane, and maybe the worst decision of the franchise. Utterly unnecessary. There had been talks about this in some of the other films, I know, but the fact that they finally went through with it just shows that they ran out of ideas. There was a moment towards the end as well that was zooming in on Maisie's eye, and I genuinely thought it was going to like turn into a reptile dinosaur looking eye. I would have freaked the fuck out if that happened. It's a genuine jump the shark idea that is what a first school kid comes up with after the science scene in the first movie about how they make the dinosaurs. The only good thing is that the following movie did retroactively make this a better reveal in kind of telling us a bit more about that process, but the damage is kind of just done in this film. So the final third of the film takes place in the mansion, and we are shown the Indoraptor, following on from the Indominus Rex in the film prior. A genetically engineered new species for a specific purpose this time, of hunting. Now, this I understand more than a general dinosaur auction, due to the fact that it's made for the sole purpose that the raptor has an incredible mind and is incredibly intelligent, their insane ability to communicate, and how they could be used for military purposes. So it would make a bit more sense to engineer one to be used for those purposes and then sell that, as opposed to selling the others as pets, I guess. I don't know. However, it's still stupid. Just because it's not as stupid doesn't mean it's good. This idea of using raptors in a military environment was prevalent in the last movie, and it was dumb in the last movie. It's still dumb in this movie, and it's still dumb in the next movie. But the Indoraptor looks fucking cool. I'll give you that. Cool ass design. It's funny that leading up to Dominion, they were saying how they wanted a creature to stand almost as a Joker-esque dinosaur, when there was no real sign of that in the movie. The Indoraptor is much closer to that idea. We get another slapstick comedy scene where the Indoraptor is in the cage and one of the cartoon villains is trying to take one of its teeth. The raptor raises its tail, smiling at the camera, when the guy looks behind him, hearing a noise. The chaos that ensues is all down to human error in the most stupid possible ways. Ultimately, that's always how it goes, but this one to a comically silly effect. This moment where the woman gets pushed into the middle of the lift and just screams, just be quiet and hope the lift will get off. I mean, that gives you a much better chance than screaming at the monster in front of you. So the last 20 minutes turn back into the horror movie that the opening of the film teased us with and then chose to ditch. The Indoraptor has been unleashed. 2 of the other characters have also rescued Blue, so she's now free, and I guess she's like a protagonist, so can help to save the day. Truth be told, I really enjoyed this part of the film. It's what I was hoping for when the film started. It becomes a proper creature feature of this thing hunting down this child, and it's incredibly tense. I think there is some great dinosaur action. In that cramped room when Blue comes in, it is a great moment. I like how Owen and Claire are attempting to use the raptor's design to defeat it with the triggered gun, basically trying to outsmart the smartest creature. Using that gun, they are able to kill the Indoraptor, which ultimately leads to the ending of the movie, where the consequence is unleashed onto our world. Claire resists pressing the button to release all the dinosaurs into society. They're all gonna die if they're left in here, but if they let them out, mankind's interference with God's plan or the natural order wins. She clearly acknowledges the fact that countless people fought the natural order to play God. That's what has led them to the place they're in now. Now is the time to finally allow nature to reclaim power. But then the film decides that it's actually not over yet, and Maisie releases all of them with one of the most ridiculous lines of dialogue I've ever heard, being, "I had to,
They're alive.
like me." That is horrendous. Who allowed that to happen? That's just really fucking bad, man. Who actually wrote this? So Colin Trevorrow was actually still a writer on this, who directed the first and the next one. And Derek Connolly was a writer. What has he done? He wrote Monster Trucks in like 2016. He also did the story for Rise of Skywalker, the worst Star Wars movie. This film is such a fascinating mixed bag of things. Every time it has something good going, it turns around and shoots itself in the foot and then shoots us in the nuts. Filled with baffling decisions and story ideas and confusing themes, but it's done in such a way that I'm never bored throughout. The direction is incredible. This film has some of the most beautiful visuals and effects of the entire series, and some of the best set pieces and genuinely investing character work. I find myself having such a good time. J.A. Bayona did too good of a job for this film, and then he went on to direct Society of the Snow, so says all you need to know about the guy's talent. And honestly, despite it being the most bizarre in nature of these new Jurassic World films, until Rebirth comes out, this is probably my favourite one.